get to it. Let me quickly talk about some upcoming events before we hear about resilient leadership. Next CEO Club meeting, put on your calendars, please. January 28th. We have Dave Cordish's partner, Joseph Weinberg. You know, they're really making a move on the gaming industry here in Maryland. They just got state approval for the license in Anne Arundel County. They're looking for local approval, I guess county approval. And then it's probably going to be a go. So he's going to tell us what's involved, what's going on with the Cordish company with respect to that. Presidential Advisory Council, I talked to you a little bit about that, where we act as a board of advisors. Some people had some questions about that. December 16th. The following CEO Club meeting after that is March 25th with Rick Cerrone. Guy's an advisor to George Steinbrenner now, and really interesting guy. I'm really happy to have him. So put your calendars there, January 28th, March 25th. And then our annual Kristen Rita Strauss Foundation Yellow Dress Golf Tournament. This will be the 9th year, June 14th at Hayfields. We're taking reservations now. We will be sold out again like we have been every year. So if you're interested in getting involved with that, we're going to have a dinner, golf dinner, and full-blown auction again this year too. So see me or see Sharon after the meeting if you want to get involved. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, let me tell you what's going to happen here for the rest of the talk. You're going to hear a little bit from me. I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of the book, what went into it. You're going to hear from George a little bit about what we call the secrets of resilient leadership. And then you're going to hear a little bit more from me in terms about some of those characteristics. And then George will wrap it up. Like we said, we authored this book. It's called The Secrets of Resilient Leadership When Failure is Not an Option. And it's kind of exciting. The publisher is kind of excited too. We sold a couple thousand copies right now so far. It's just been out 2 weeks. The publisher's really happy because it's available through Barnes & Noble, all the bookstores nationwide. Get it through Amazon, wherever you can buy books. But the publisher's really happy because the division of Barnes & Noble that had purchased the 2,000 copies, or up to 2,000 copies, is their corporate division. And what they're finding out is that people are buying them not only for themselves, they're buying it for their executive team, their employees, and so forth. And when they're sold in the corporate division, they don't come back. When the publisher sells to the bookstores, they don't get sold, they go back to the publisher. She's real happy about that. This is my first book. I've written a lot of articles, close to 100 now, but this is my first book, and I was very happy when George asked me to co-author the book, because I really feel nothing is more relevant today in business, and even in your personal life, to be able to bounce back from adversity. You know, from my personal perspective, when I started doing some research for this book a couple years ago, it became very aware to me early on that the reason I was able to bounce back from adversity, and nothing is more adverse as when you lose a child, like I did 8 years ago. And my ability to bounce back was because of the strong family support system that I developed very early in my life, and I'm fortunate to still have it today. And the book came out a couple days before Thanksgiving, and I dedicated this book to my family. And I mean, family is a wonderful resource, and it's okay when you get down and out to seek advice and counsel and lean on them a little bit. They'll give you advice. Sometimes they'll give you advice when you don't ask for it, but it's kind of powerful. And one of the things that I did in dedication of this book to my family is at Thanksgiving I gave a little toast, and I actually read a passage that I wrote. I had a long written thing to the dedication, a couple sentences to my family, my brothers and sisters, and of course the publisher cut all that out. He wanted it short and sweet, but I kept it and read it to him, and it was pretty powerful. I mean, there weren't too many dry eyes in the place, and it's great to have that support. My wife is actually here today giving me more support, so I want to recognize her as well. It's a powerful, powerful thing, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and we address that issue in the book as well. But another reason I was glad George asked me to write the book, I was able to cross it off on my bucket list. I don't know how many people have bucket lists, things you want to do before you kick the bucket, but it was nice to cross that off. But people were also telling us that they really liked the title, from the framework of resilient leadership when failure is not an option. And it's really kind of critical in terms of business today, because there's getting situations where you don't want to fail. I got to ask you all from a perspective, hold your hands up if you've ever failed in business, in a business situation of any sort. Have you ever failed? My hand's the first one to go up, I can tell you that. There really should probably not be a hand in the room. Keep your hands up. If you failed, not only you failed, but it cost you a lot of money. I've spent a lot of money in that arena too, because it does happen. I don't know how many of you were here a couple years ago when we had Steve Jeppe speak to us and talk about his story. A lot of people here. Really interesting story, because he was in a situation. He was a high school dropout. He got a job as a mailman. He was working there a couple years. He was married. He had a couple kids. And he had this urge to start his own business in his early 20s. And he was kind of interesting because he said, guys, I had no options. I had no education. I had a wife and 2 kids. I could not fail. And he worked his tail off, and today he's a part owner of a Major League Baseball team, the Baltimore Orioles, and plus he runs a $500 million company. So it's a powerful, powerful story. And again, the concept that when failure is not an option, and we address those issues in the book. Now let me tell you a little bit about George, a co-author here, because George has a pretty impressive background. He's considered one of the world's leading experts on crisis and human resilience. He's been a pioneer in developing programs designed to foster human resilience in the wake of crisis, disasters, and psychological trauma around the world. He's a professor of psychology at Loyola University, an associate professor of psychiatry at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, and he's the author and editor of 20 books, as well as numerous articles. He comes to us by way of Harvard University, where he was a Harvard Fellow, as well as a Harvard Scholar. He has studied resiliency for the better part of 20 years and has worked with some of the most resilient people in the world. He's going to share with us some of the secrets that we uncovered in the writing of this book that he has learned about resiliency as a result of the many years of research and working with people in circumstances that very few people in the world have gained access to. His most recent project involves interviewing elite Special Forces operations, law enforcement, and military personnel, including Navy SEALs, in order to find the secrets of their ability to handle stress and bounce back from crisis and adversity. George is no stranger to the corporate world either. He has worked with numerous organizations through his United Nations affiliate nonprofit foundation that was set up 21 years ago. George, please come up and share some of the secrets you have learned. Let's hear it for Dr. George Everly.
Thanks, Doug. That's a nice introduction. We can stop there, I guess, right? Do you want to fill your evaluation forms out there? I'm going to actually start with a quiz. Okay, you can just kind of think about it, or if you want to jot it on the back of a napkin, that's fine. I want you to think, when you think of powerful, resilient leaders, who do you think of? People that entered some situation where things were desperate, where things were bad, and they were able to help people bounce back, their organizations, their communities, or their countries. Just think about that for a minute. You know, 2 or 3 people through history that come to mind. And that's a quiz, because we're going to come back and visit it a little bit later. We're excited about the release of the Secrets of Resilient Leadership. Doug will be highlighting some of the main points a little bit later. I'm really going to talk about what's not in the book. I'm going to talk about how we got to the book, how we discovered those secrets, what went into it. In effect, I'm going to talk a little bit about the secrets behind the secrets. I didn't start out life to be a crisis and disaster expert. Around the university, they call me Dr. Gloom and Doom, and I'm not sure that's exactly the moniker I wanted. I started out in fact, Doug and I went to college together. We were business majors. So I was going to be an accountant, I guess. And then my grades weren't the greatest. Do you remember being in college and handling electives? Remember what electives were? To me, an elective was something in the afternoon that was really easy. The idea was to boost the grade point average. Okay? So I had enough tough business courses, so I was looking around for easy electives. And I found one in agriculture. This is a true story. Horseback riding. And it swung both ways, advanced undergraduate or graduate credit. So I was on that one. I didn't tell you about this, did I? I wanted to keep this to myself. So I signed up for the course. I was on the waiting list. As you might imagine, it was a popular course. Didn't clear. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm down the agricultural end of the college. I got to take something. And I said to the guy, just sign me up for anything. He says, well, there's this course. There's only 3 people in it. I said, great. Agricultural, 4:30 in the afternoon. I'm there. He says, yeah, fill out the paperwork. He says, yeah, this is a great course. You get your own epinephrine pen. I said, epinephrine pen? You mean the thing that people kind of shoot themselves with if they're going into shock or something? He says, yeah. I said, why am I getting that? He says, well, in case you go into shock. I said, the only way I'd go into shock is if I ace this course. I mean, why are you giving me an epinephrine pen? And he says, well, it's beekeeping. I said, no. I don't do beekeeping. What other options do you have? He said, well, there's got to be something else. There wasn't. So I'm looking through the card catalog. It's the last date I dropped. I thought, I got to take something. I go through psychology. I find psychology. Okay, I hated psychology. Ended up as a psychologist, go figure. But I hated psychology. It was the only course I can remember falling asleep in. And this particular course was called abnormal psychology. Any of you ever take abnormal psychology? It's great. See, I thought psychologists were people that had issues, and they wanted to resolve their own issues and a degree at the same time. So I thought that was pretty efficient. But I was going to be a business major. This was going to be a concrete science. I was going to go into an accounting. And but abnormal psychology was the course that was open. 4:30 Thursday afternoon. I said, okay, I'll take it. Well, little did I know. At the end of that course, I was able to diagnose most of my friends, I think. It was kind of interesting. So I thought, well, maybe this is an interesting career I can go into. So I thought, well, maybe I should get my feet wet and practice a little bit. Go see what this is all about. So I signed up for a telephone hotline in the community. So the telephone hotline was drafting people, and I got that about 20 hours of training, and I was ready to rock and roll. I was ready to go. Now, do you remember Ted Bundy? Does that name ring a bell? He was a serial killer. He actually was an excellent telephone crisis interventionist. I actually had dinner with Ann Rule, who had written a number of books about him and serial killers, and she said he was excellent. I figured if he could do it, I could do it, right? So my first week on the job, 2 phone calls would change my life. Young lady calls up, says, are you a crisis counselor? I say, yes, ma'am, I am. And I do taxes, by the way, but what else can I do for you? And she said, well, I'm having a crisis. I said, what is that? She said, my boyfriend. He's not being friendly. I don't know whether to invite him to the prom or not. I said, maybe you missed out. And she said, well, this is a crisis hotline, isn't it? I said, yes, ma'am, it is, but you're whining. This is not a whine line. Just call me back when it escalates. And she said, oh no, come on, please. I said, oh, all right. You ready? You ready? Write this down. I want you to write this down. She said, okay, I'm ready. Dump him. He said, what? I said, dump him. Got another boyfriend. She said, really? I said, yeah. She said, well, it was easy. I said, yeah. This was great. I had found the career for me. I mean, people call up, they ask you stupid questions, you give them simple answers. I'm going to be a psychologist. This is great. Now, about a few days later, a phone call. Guy calls up, says, you a crisis counselor? Yeah, I am. And I do taxes. What can I do for you? And he said, well, I'm thinking about killing somebody. Now, did you ever get one of those real things that you never thought you'd get? You're trained for them, but as soon as you see them, it's like, oh my. And you get this instant kind of dumbing down. And I thought, is this a crank call? I was hoping it was. And he says, no, I'm having trouble with my boss at work, and I'm just going to kill the SOB. Well, long story short, he survived, the boss survived, probably not because of me, probably in spite of me, scared the heck out of me. Based on those experiences, though, I decided, this handling people in crisis is not an easy thing, and maybe I should study it. Because literally, no pun intended and no hyperbole, sometimes words can save lives. Words can motivate people. You know that in your businesses. Words motivate people more than money motivates people. but you know that. So I decided I needed to learn more about what motivated people, what helped people bounce back. I wanted to study this. I wanted to get really good at it. I thought it was transferable to business. I never thought it would transfer to my own family. God's blessed me. I've got 3 children. One day, my oldest was sitting in my lap. We were on a floor, sitting on a floor, not unlike this floor, carpet, and she's crying on my shoulder. Then finally at 4:12 in the afternoon, we heard the words that you never want to hear. Her mother had just died. And she buries her head into my shoulder and she cries. And I thought, I'm a crisis expert. What do I do now? A little bit later, I walked into my daughter's room. She's sitting on the bed. She's crying. She looks lost. I thought to myself, it's game time. I didn't have a script. I didn't know exactly what to do. I went and sat on her bed. I've written 20 books. The knowledge evaded me. So I just started to blurt something out, and I said, you and I are going to go on a journey together. I want you to know 3 things. I love you. I'll never leave you. I'll never lie to you. But you can't lie to me either. I was hoping those things would set the foundation. I hope those things would teach her something about resilience, about relying on other people. Personally, I guess what I was trying to do in my own cryptic way was to create a culture of resilience. Professionally, I spent 36 years treating people with stress-related illnesses. I started treating patients one-on-one. I treated high blood pressure, panic attacks, ulcers, you name it, I treated it if it's stress-related. Then at one point, my career moved along and I started treating communities that were in crisis. After the Serbo-Croatian War, I spent time in Croatia. After the Oklahoma City bombing, I was there for about a year working in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. After 9/11, I was asked to go to New York and work there for 2 to 3 years. And then I was asked and recruited by Secretary Ridge to be an advisor to Homeland Security on terrorism and pandemic influenza and things like that. But then my patience, if you will, moved to a different level. I started working with countries. I spent time working for the King of Kuwait in Kuwait after the first Persian Gulf War. So I started with one person, and then I ended up working with countries at a time. But I was still looking for the search, in effect, for resilience. Because what works with one person at a time would ultimately work with nations. So my quest was to find the secrets of resiliency. This is an 18-year journey. Started really in 1990. Started with a review of history. That's what good academics do. I was an academic. You read everything out there. I didn't read research studies so much. I actually read books about people that were supposed to be resilient. Who do you think about that's really resilient? Warriors. People that deal with adversity on a daily basis. I read The Prince. I read The Art of War. I read The Guide to the Righteous Protector, written in 1501 by Erasmus. But then I knew I had to do research. We had 250,000 people. We did what's called a stratified random sample, and we started creating statistical models. This is what good academics do. So we created models of what caused disease. The models we were interested in predicting, not only did we want to predict burnout, not only did we want to predict stress-related illnesses. I bet everybody in this room has had a variation of a stress-related illness once in their life. I wanted to know what caused it. But I also wanted to know what led to job satisfaction. Why did people want to leave the job? What psychological factors enhance their performance on the job? Those were the things we were looking for. But I also studied something different. I studied brain chemistry. Do you know that brain chemistry of someone who's confident is different than the brain chemistry of someone who's not? 1992, while I was working in Sweden and later in Switzerland, we developed and proposed the first drug that could actually block psychological trauma by altering brain chemistry. But I didn't want to rely on drugs. I wanted to see what the chemistry of confidence was. And more importantly, could I make people confident? Could I change their brains? That was one of the questions. So in an effort to discover the secrets of resilient leadership, we started with history, we ended up with brain chemistry. So what is resilient leadership? Real simple. Resilient leadership may be thought of as those leadership behaviors that help others adapt to adversity or rebound from it. Resilient leadership is the catalyst that inspires us to go places we never would have gone, to attempt things we never would have dared on our own. It pushes us to successes that we wouldn't have otherwise realized. If we can unravel this mystery, the mystery of resilient leadership, I would suggest to you that things like the Vietnam conflict, the Bay of Pigs, Katrina, and this economic meltdown would never have happened if only we had had resilient leadership. 2 years ago was my desire to take the secrets of human resilience and give them to the most important people of my life, my kids. So I wrote a book called The Resilient Child. And it was the musings, the ramblings of a person, of a father, of a clinician. In fact, I asked my kids, I said, what would you like for a Christmas present? My son said, real estate. I said, well, go figure. I said, other than real estate, what would you like? He just kind of looked at me. I said, how about some things I've learned in my career that might help you? And they weren't interested. But they got it anyway. And that was the book for them. I was blessed. The book won the gold medal for Book of the Year last year, parenting category for independent publishers. I realized those same lessons, though, could be taught in business settings. It could be taught in military settings. It could be taught anywhere that you anticipate adversity. So now those lessons have been taught at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, the FBI Academy, the Tulane School of Medicine, Public Health. And we keep trying to expand it. And this book was the opportunity to put those lessons together. And it gave me the opportunity, something that was on my bucket list, and that is to work with a cherished friend, Doug Strouse, and my son, who soon will be graduating, earning his own living, I hope. Today I'd like to share, just from the 30,000 strategic foot view, some of those things that we learned. And then I'm going to turn it over to Doug to cover some of the specific points. What did we learn through the research that we had done, studying brain chemistry, psychological attitudes, and reading history? We learned something interesting. It was like many things. It was right before us all the time. The secrets of resilient leadership can be distilled into two things. We call them the covenants. Strong and decisive action. Now, I want you to think about current events, and I want you to rate current leaders across the world on these criteria. Strong, decisive action. Strong action encourages people, it motivates people, but also honesty and honor. That instills confidence and trust and fidelity. I'm going to distill it even more for you. Strength and honor. That's what it boils down to. It works at the macro level, it works at the micro level. There were 6 natural components we found. Integrity, optimism, perseverance. This sounds almost un-American, taking responsibility for your actions. You know why people don't want to take responsibility? Doug will get into it a little bit, but my sense is that they think the mistakes they make are who they are. Mistakes aren't who you are, it's what you did. But you want to know the best psychological test? Anybody that works for you, you don't have to give huge batteries on this dimension. All you need to do is watch how they handle mistakes. That's the best predictor of who they are as a person. Crisis communications is another factor. Building a culture of resilience. Developing behavioral body armor. I'm going to turn it over to Doug. Doug's going to just highlight a couple of those points. So let me give you a little bit of an introduction, but you certainly know Doug. He's founded the Baltimore CEO Club. He's also CEO of Global Data. Doug has hosted his own radio show. He's a consultant. He's on many boards of directors. But Doug is, on a personal level, Doug's the brother I never had. Doug has been a friend since 3rd grade. I was precocious. I was only 4 or 5 at the time, but Doug was much older. Doug is one of those guys that you want in your corner. Doug is all about resilience. Doug's a poster child for resilience. So Doug, I'm going to turn it over to you. Talk a little bit about some specific factors.
It actually was fourth grade, I think, was it third grade we go back to. I helped them all the way through. We're going to talk about a couple things. As George mentioned integrity, George mentioned optimism, and he mentioned perseverance. I'm going to highlight some of the things. A lot more things are in the book. There are really three kind of important characteristics. And integrity, quite frankly, is just the quality of being honest, having high moral principles, doing what is right that is good for you as well as good for others. And folks, it's not situational. You don't have integrity in certain situations. It's a consistent way of living, consistent way of running your life over and over again. When you see it in others, you know it and you admire it. And it really engenders trust, especially if you're in a business environment. The employees love it. The employees feel safe and employees feel secure. They know they're dealing with somebody of integrity. And it's a personality trait that we want all our leaders to have. It's an interesting quote by, Warren Buffett, CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, one of the wealthiest men in the world, who's really a symbol of integrity. And he says when he goes to hire somebody, he looks for three characteristics, only three. They have to have integrity, they have to have intelligence, and they have to have energy. And he said if they don't have the first one, the other two will kill you. You've got to have integrity. And with resilient leaders and resilient leadership, it's the courage to act when the outcome is not always going to be positive. Because not every situation is going to be positive, I can assure you. Let me give you an example of integrity from a corporate perspective. Who remembers the Tylenol situation, the Tylenol recall, way back when? What year was it? Anybody remember?
86.
86? Who said 82?
82.
What month?
It was
Who said September?
September.
This is great. September 1982. My hat's off to you guys in the audience. What had happened, a brief history. 12-year-old girl took some Tylenol capsules and died shortly thereafter. Within days, several more people died. They all had taken extra strength Tylenol capsules. They finally put it together. They realized some bottles were tampered with. What somebody had done, quite frankly, is went into the local store, bought a couple bottles, removed the capsules, poured out the medicine, put in poison, and put them back on the shelf. When the investigation was done, they found 8 bottles were contaminated. 5 of the bottles were at victims' houses. 3 more were still on the shelves. So their quick action actually saved some people's lives. What did Tylenol do? Parent company J&J. George talked about it briefly. They took responsibility. They came to the table and they tried to do whatever they could for the consumer. Jim Burke, president of Johnson & Johnson at the time, it was just unbelievable. Now it's a textbook case study. You see it in case studies about J&J. They warned hospitals. They stopped production. They stopped their advertising. They stopped their marketing. And they did a nationwide recall of every Tylenol product that they had. They didn't know at the time it was just capsules. Every Tylenol product, they recalled 31 million bottles at a retail value of $100 million in 1982 dollars. That'd be a couple $100 million today. They told the public not to take their product. Even had the Chicago police running around in their cars, had it on TV, but had megaphones. Do not take Tylenol product. So what happened to Tylenol from a business perspective? It was like a nightmare. Their market share, they controlled, they dominated the market. They had a market share of 75%. Shortly dropped to 8% almost overnight. But what happened? What happened afterwards? The marketplace rebounded. They realized this was a company of integrity, and they cared more about consumer health and safety than about their corporate well-being. Shortly within a year, Tylenol came back to their dominating share of approximately 70-75%, and the ship was righted. The lesson here, I think, is clear cut. You got to have the courage to do the right thing. Now, fortunately, that was a giant company. They could withstand something like that. Not everybody can withstand something like that, but they did the right thing. James Burke did a heck of a job as president of J&J, and he came to the table. Critical component, integrity. Let's talk a little bit about optimism, one of my favorite things. Quite frankly, it's just a tendency to take a positive view on things. You know, you expect the best outcome, and you look for the best outcome to happen. And you believe that good is going to prevail in all situations. And contrary to popular belief, the purpose of optimistic leadership is not to predict the future, but it is to make the future happen. Optimistic people are much more persevering than pessimistic people. They're more task-oriented in their approach. They're committed to success. They can tolerate adversity more than pessimists. And in their eyes, quite frankly, if there is a breath of hope, there's life. To them, the glass is always half filled. It's not half empty. Now, let me give you an example of optimistic leadership. George worked in New York after 9/11. Who was more powerful in that situation in 9/11 than the former mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani? He led with an optimistic vision, and his quote, what was his quote when he got to the microphone? He said, "We're going to rebuild. We're going to rebuild, and we're going to be stronger than ever before, and nobody can stop us." I mean, he set the tone. He had a commanding presence. His rhetoric just epitomized resilient leadership. And he helped to lead the country out of the abyss that we were in. So it's really, you look from optimistic leadership, it's really the ability to see the opportunity in every crisis and really have a vision of what success is going to look like. That guy, I don't know whether you follow that crazy guy on TV, Jim Cramer, the financial guru. He says, look for the bull market in every economy because it's there. And from an optimistic perspective, it's find the positive in every situation because that's there as well too. A couple more thoughts about optimists and who they are. Quite frankly, it's easier to run a company if you're an optimistic type of individual. Optimistic leaders, they see problems as temporary rather than long-lasting. They see problems as being specific. They're limited in scope, not pervasive and long-lasting. And they also realize, important thing, they also realize that things can go wrong because they go wrong every day in our businesses. But things that go wrong may be beyond your control, so they don't ruminate over it and beat themselves up time after time. What did James Burke do of Tylenol, of Johnson & Johnson? You know, you talk about something outside of his control. I mean, it's unbelievable that he responded. And you can only do what you can do. You can't have the weight of the world on your shoulder. So, frankly, the optimistic leader, what do? They search for opportunities in every situation, in every crisis. And sometimes they even welcome the crisis to a degree because they realize that they are not going to succumb to adversity, and some of their competitors may. And if they can just wait it out and be perseverant, if you will, they may be the last person standing. And that brings us to the concept of perseverance, being able to wait things out as long as it possibly takes. To me, that's one of my favorite characteristics. You know, and it's really one of the key to resilient leadership. And it's really, when you think about it, it's a never give up attitude. And we hear it all the time. You know, it's an axiom, never give up. But it's really, you look at it from a persevering perspective. You never give up. You keep on trying. I personally think it's the best predictor of success. And because good things, you hear the old saying, good things happen to good people who work hard. Try again, whatever it takes. Churchill, we talk a great deal about Churchill in the book and some of the things he did, not only from communication, but from perseverance. He had a great quote. The only difference between humankind's greatest success and its most dismal failures has been the willingness to try again and again, and simply put, never give up. And really, some of the great American success stories is not a result of genius, it's a result of tenacity and never giving up. Let me give you an example. Audience, again. Who invented the light bulb? You did real good with Tylenol. Who invented the light bulb?
Thomas Edison.
Thomas Edison. Anybody else? What year? Got you on that one, didn't I? 1890. Who else? Anybody else? Any other thoughts who invented the light bulb? It was not Thomas Edison. Good try, Lindo. It was a good try. Anybody else? She was close on the date, though. Light bulb invented 1800 by an English scientist by the name of Humphrey Davy. And what he did, he put together a carbon filament with a battery. The problem was, it didn't work. It lit up, boom, it went right out. No marketable value. Light bulb was not invented. Or it was invented, but it wasn't usable. 60 years later, another English scientist by the name of Joseph Swan, he's actually an English physicist. He put together carbon and a paper type of filament with a battery. Same thing. Worked for a quick second, blew right out. Wasn't until 1879 Thomas Edison came along with his carbon cotton filament in an oxygen-free type bulb, and it worked. He got it to glow for approximately 40 hours, eventually led to 1,200 hours, and who knows how long it is today. So, what is the difference between Thomas Edison, Humphrey Davy, and Joseph Swan? Edison persevered. He worked and worked and worked until he came up with the proper combination. Now, question for you all. How many experiments do you think Edison had before he finally came up with the right combination to make the light bulb happen? Let me hear a guess. You were close with Edison before.
1,999.
2,500.
2,500?
Thousands.
What? What'd you say?
Thousands.
1,000. Give me a number. You said thousands. We got 2,000. We got 199.
1,200.
6,000 times. 6,000 experiments. I mean, I can't even fathom that. I mean, you got to give up sometime. Good thing it wasn't 5,999. 6,000 experiments before he came up with the right combination. It just blows your mind. Again. Perseverance. Never, ever, ever give up. George can tell you about research, in terms of that's all you do. You take what's already in the literature and you add to it. That's really what Edison did. He saw they had a formula. It wasn't a proper formula, and he kept on trying to take it to the next level. 6,000 times later, it worked. Another example. How many people have heard of Harlan Sanders? Anybody? JT?
Colonel Sanders.
Huh?
Is that Colonel Sanders?
Colonel Sanders. Way to go, JT. Buy a pair of pants from JT. It's Colonel Sanders of Kentucky Fried Chicken fame. What a story this guy has. Anybody know the story? You know Colonel Sanders? Born in 1890, left school in the 6th grade to help his family, like a lot of people did in that era. He joined the Army at 16. A couple years later, he left, started selling life insurance. That didn't last too long. He failed at that. He invested in a gas lighting system. He failed at that. He lost job after job after job. He finally, I don't think there's any lawyers we have here today, but he's pretty interesting. He got a law degree by mail. Some of our lawyers would probably think they got a law degree by mail too. Got a law degree by mail, practiced law for a period of time, was fairly successful. And then he made the mistake of having a fight with one of his clients inside the courthouse. So his career came to a pretty abrupt halt. So he's no longer practicing law. 1929, he opened up a small restaurant in a gas station, just small, nothing to write home about. But he was recognized about 10 years later by the then governor of Kentucky, and he was made an honorary colonel because he had a tremendous recipe. So he made an honorary colonel. So he wanted to take that to the next level. He said, I got to start a chain of these stores. So he tried to start a chain in Kentucky. He failed. 2 years later, he tried to start a chain in North Carolina. He failed again. So he said, maybe it's not quite like Edison, but he dressed up in what he thought what a Kentucky colonel looked like, and he started traveling across the country. He had a new idea. He was going to franchise his concept. He drove across the country. Now, another question for the audience here. How many times do you think he was turned down before he finally made a sale of substance and started his career in franchising? Who's got a guess for me? 900.
6,000.
6,000. Trying to catch up to Edison. Legend has it he was turned down 1,009 times. Now, are people that run sales forces, and you hear your sales force, you try to tell them to take no for an answer no more than, 17 times, or at least 17 times? 1,009 times, and of course, the rest is history. I guess we want to really leave you with the concept, if you want something badly enough, take that risk and go for it, and work hard, and just never, ever give up. And that's what we wrote this book about, is when failure is not an option. You're not going to accept failure, just like Steve Jeppy didn't want to accept failure, and you're going to continue to work to make it happen. I talked about integrity, optimism, and perseverance, and that's how George and I operationalized the concept of what he just talked about the strength and honor. And I'm going to leave it to George to have a few more comments, and then we'll wrap it up and answer any questions you may have.
Next time, don't put your nose over mine. Thanks, Doug. So have you thought about the leadership? The leaders? Who would you put on your list?
Mr. Butler.
Washington, Lincoln, and Churchill.
Okay. Washington, Lincoln, and Churchill. Lynn, what were you going to say?
They were on my list.
Really? Okay. Anybody else? Giuliani? Okay.
Walt Disney.
Walt Disney. Interesting. How many jobs did he get fired from, or, yeah, okay. Anybody else?
Gandhi.
Gandhi. Okay. All right. On our list we had Washington, Lincoln, we had Robert E. Lee, Harry Truman. All of these people entered a situation that was adverse. But near the top of the list has to be FDR as well as Churchill. You wonder today where the Churchills are, where the FDRs are. Let me give you some tips, some basic tips for resiliency, whether it's personal or when you try to help others. I was fortunate enough to know a guy by the name of Dr. Hans Selye. Selye was actually the man that coined the term stress. He brought it from physics into medical sciences. And I was invited to his retirement party. And there are worse places to go. His retirement party was hosted by the royal family of Monaco. So they send out invitations. Now, Selye was probably the greatest endocrinologist of the last century. Written something like 800 books. He was an amazing guy. And they asked him, what do you want on the invitation? Is there one thing that summarizes your career, that really pinpoints your contribution to science and humanity? This is the man that defined how the human endocrine system worked. You know what he said? I want one thing on the card. Very simple. I want you to put the quote, it's not what happens to you that matters. It's how you take it. Counterintuitive. Great man of science, but it all boils down to psychology. Here's some tips for resilience. Be honest and fair whenever you deal with people. People will remember. You know what? People quickly forget their victories, but they never forget their defeats. Teach that to your managers. Be optimistic. Expect success. Remember, the single best predictor of success is perseverance. Be willing to work harder than your competition. Be a role model for those around you. Understand that taking responsibility for your mistakes shows strength of character and integrity. Realize that nobody owes you anything. Rewards are earned. Remember, one of the best investments you can make is other people. They'll stand by you when you lead them to success, but perhaps most importantly, they'll stand beside you and carry you if necessary in times of turmoil. Invest in your people. Avoid toxic people. Those who betray others will betray you. Surround yourself with honest and trustworthy people. And have faith. I'm not preaching at you, just faith in something bigger than yourself. I've worked in 32 countries, and I will tell you that I generally go there when you don't want to be there. But I try to help people, cultures, communities rebound. And the one thing I find, culture after culture, country after country, is that people have a faith in something greater than themselves generally do better than those who only believe in what you can see, feel, and touch. I want to end with the Christmas present that I gave my kids. Again, they were expecting real estate. Let's just say they didn't get it. But I thought, what is it that I could pass on to them? It's called a parent's reflection. I hope I may have the wisdom, the strength, and compassion to be all my children need in a parent. I hope they can show unconditional love and support without overindulgence in worldly goods or setting inappropriate expectations for the nature of the world in which they'll live. And when I'm gone from this world, I hope to be judged not by how much I made, not by how much I gave, not by how many names I dropped, but by how many people hear my name and think fondly of me. I hope my kids will say of me, he was wise, he was silly, with all his flaws, he was still a good guy. He was Air Force. He taught us the value of honesty, fidelity, family, and friends. Above all else, he loved us. He was there when we needed him, and he'll be with us always. And that was my present to my children. I wonder if being a leader is any different than being a parent in some ways. I wonder if the goal of the parent is not to make your job obsolete. I wonder if the job of the leader is to, in essence, develop the people underneath you so that your job becomes obsolete. There's one other thing I want to mention to you today, and I want to reintroduce Kent Malwis. We have taken this to the next level, and we will be partnering with the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and developing a crisis leadership institute. And I'd like to have Kent just stand up and say a few words about that, if you would, Kent.
Wow, tough acts to follow, so I'm not even going to try.
Here, why don't you come up because
Sure.
your microphone.
Yeah, we don't want to follow Dr. Everly with all of his expertise, but we are very excited to help Dr. Everly to kind of spread the word. We do a lot of training in all sorts of disciplines, IT, project management. They all add value to the students and the organizations that we deliver training to. I know it improves people's lives, which is a big part of the mission of what we do, but I can't think of something that is more valuable to the people that will receive this, and something that we're more proud of to help to spread to the military, to our children, to the teachers, to the leaders, to not only help them to get through crisis, but improve their own situations, their organizations, their families, and ultimately our country. So we're very excited to be a partner with Dr. Everly on this, and we're just ready to get going. And I just can't wait to get out there and help build the network and the channel to distribute this type of amazing, amazing research and content. So thank you.
Thank you, Ken. So this really is an opportunity. As Doug said earlier about opportunities, I have a professorship at the University of Hong Kong, and they say the word crisis consists of two characters, one that means danger, one that means opportunity. This is an opportunity. This society is an opportunity. My son, who is also a co-author on the book, is finishing his JD and MBA, and he's going out and he'll be trying to get a job. And he said, "Dad, this is a difficult market." And I said, "Yeah, you're lucky, aren't you?" And he looked at me like, "Dad, you're not paying attention." I said, No. A rising tide lifts all boats. But adversity, the best will rise to the top. This is an opportunity. I said, there will be fortunes made in this economy if you have the courage to go forth, if you have the courage to persevere. And you may have to fail 1,008 times, and that's okay. So in conjunction with the university, we'll also be offering a certificate, a non-credit certificate in crisis leadership. And we are in negotiations with the military to have all mid-level managers take such a course. And as they said, better to be lucky than good. Timing is everything. And this is a time when I think crisis leadership, resilient leadership, is necessary for not just businesses, but for our country as well. Thank you, Doug, for the opportunity to come and speak today.
Thank you, George. Come on back up. We'll take some questions. I just want to add one thing. And I had told you before, I just came back from Greece with the opening of the chapter over there. And the history there is just so unbelievable. We talked about, we talk a little bit about it in the book, but this, one of the philosophers, Pericles, talks about, and George alluded to it, it's not what is written on your headstone that counts. It's what you leave behind that's interwoven into the lives of others. And that's really what you get back, your legacy. So very important. We're open to any questions anybody has. We also, books are available for sale. George also brought with him a couple copies of The Resilient Child, too. So if you want to buy some books, we'd be more than happy to sell them to you. But we're willing to take any questions. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
We talked a little bit about this. For some of you, I teach a course at the university, and students are different today than they were when all of us went to school. What do you think that we should be teaching these children, I say kids, graduating and going to go about the world? What are they maybe missing, and what should we be instilling in them?
Question is, what should we be teaching the next generation as they go out into a world that's certainly changed? I'll tell you a quick story. I was, again, wanted to study people that I thought were naturally resilient, and tried to find out whether it was genetic or it was learned. And so I talked to people that had a track record of resiliency in remarkably adverse situations. So one of the populations I'm studying is Navy SEALs. So arguably the most advanced, sophisticated military force in the world. And I asked this one gentleman who had been a SEAL for 17 years. And I said, what got you through Hell Week? What got you through what they call BUDS training, which is the basic training? And what did you learn from that? What got you through, and what has helped you on many, many deployments and very dangerous missions? And he said, it's hard to put my finger on it other than to say, it's something I learned when I was a kid. It's to be honest. It's to work hard. It's to take responsibility for what you do. And it's to never give up. I have a young daughter, and you walk into her room and it's covered with athletic trophies. And you think, oh gosh, you got an athlete, huh? No. She gets a trophy for showing up. I knew she wasn't going to be an athlete when at 6, she's laying down on the soccer field saying, Dad, I'm dying. I said, no, I think you're out of breath. She said, I don't like this. I said, you'll get over it. So I was coaching her team. I said, get on the sideline. We'll put you back in later. She goes back in. 5 minutes later, she's walking off the field, staggering. She says, Dad, I'm leaking. Now, with a 6-year-old, you don't know what that means. So I said, where are you leaking from? And she held her arms out. It's August, 90 degrees. And her arms are glistening. She said, Dad, I'm wet. I said, honey, it's perspiration. She says, I don't like that either. So much for her athletic career. So why does she have trophies? Does that set the expectation that all I have to do is show up?
Yeah.
Well, what's going to happen when they stop giving trophies for showing up? That concerns me. So I guess it goes back to what the Navy SEALs said. Teach them to be honest. Teach them to work hard. Teach them to never give up. What else?
Lynn?
I have a question. Most of the leaders that you mentioned are men, and I'm just wondering in any of your research if you've found some unbelievable women globally who've risen to the top.
Oh, you give me that one. I want the other question.
I want to share.
Unfortunately, not too many. Probably the one that comes to my mind most readily is Margaret Thatcher, Great Britain. But you just seeing, over time, probably in the last, 50 years or so, women are finally making a move. This women with voting is not that long when you think about it. It's women are becoming leaders in all positions in America today. But I think from a historical perspective, I don't know, maybe you might have some thoughts on that, George.
Golda Meir comes to mind as well.
And it's not that women obviously have less of a leadership aptitude. It's simply that they've had less opportunities to do so. And I think that's what's going to be really great about my daughter's generation, is that you'll start to see opportunities that were never given to little girls now growing into young women, and it's going to be a very exciting world.
Another thing that's pretty interesting with that, Lynn, is because it's a great question. I mean, George wrote a book, Resilient Child. I mean, it's really noted in the literature tremendously the problems young girls have with self-esteem. And that's part of the thing. Once they develop that feeling of confidence, we call it self-efficacy, then they can rise. You can see what's happening with the glass ceiling now. Women are breaking that. They're getting into the boardrooms. Not in great numbers. They're getting into the boardrooms. They're getting in leadership position. I mean, Xerox, Mike Hoskins' company, it's run by a female CEO. I mean, so you're seeing that at the highest level of American business and industry today.
I smell a sequel.
Somebody had a question.
I was just going to ask you, do you think that some of it may be that it's not documented over years? If there were any great female leaders that it just was never recognized or even paid attention to?
That certainly could be, yeah. What else?
My wife could probably answer that. All the spiritual leaders of the past were all the women, the feminists.
Clara Barton.
There you
Just
go.
incredible.
Well, you had Hillary Clinton, who was right up there this past year, and we just had a female elected to the Supreme Court, so they're
Right.
there. And we had one
We
for
did.
vice president, right around for vice president.
We just heard from the audience about Hillary Clinton and the move she made in terms of almost really being elected to the highest office in the United States. So, I mean, it's definitely there. It's definitely going to happen. It's only a matter of time, we think. Excuse me, somebody else had a question? Anybody else? We thank you all for coming. Appreciate you being here. Again, if you want to get some books, we'd be happy to sign them for you. Again, thank you all, and put on your calendar the next meeting.
Great, that October 1982. I don't know why. All this stuff in my mind, that's being a mentalist. As far as that was
Is taping?
I know, I'm like, oh, wait a minute.
It's great, yeah. No, I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to moving. Third grade or fourth grade?
sixth grade. So are you originally, where you from? He was actually in the dumb classes. Believe it or One for the old man? Got one for the old man?
We need to look to find out what that means.
We got a lot of things down, you know.
Right, you come away with something